So my name is Lawrence Moroney. My Chinese name is Lao Letzi, and I come from Seattle, and I work on Firebase, and I work on a lot of Google technologies. We're primarily Firebase, and today I'd like to introduce Firebase to you and talk about some of the technologies that are available in Firebase to you as developers building for international applications. Now, Firebase it's more than just one product. It's an entire suite of products, and it's a strategy. And the idea behind Firebase is that we identified that developers need a lot more than just platform APIs for building applications, be it for Android or iOS or the web. A lot of developers are below what we call the poverty line, and that is their apps will make less than $500 US per month. About 10 to 15% of developers are very, very successful, making $2,500 or more per month. And we took a look at what are the attributes of those apps? What do they do? What are the habits of these developers who are very, very successful? And some of the things that we found that these developers who are very successful are doing are being able to effectively do things such as notifications to be able to retain their users, cloud messaging to be able to have interactivity within their application, some great authentication. It's very, very difficult and it's very, very expensive to build your own authentication system. So we saw that successful developers were using third-party authentication systems and allowing people to reuse their existing social identities within these successful apps. We saw that very successful developers were targeting more than one platform. The top developers all target Android, iOS, and the web. So we wanted to build a suite of technologies and a suite of services that treat all three of these equally. So you as a developer, in order to be successful, we didn't want you just to be an Android developer. We would like you to be an Android, an iOS, and a web developer also. And we group all of these technologies into three families. The first of these family are things that I call supporting developers. Technologies that make your experience as a developer better. And that's the ones on the left-hand side of the diagram here. And I'm going to go into each of these in detail. But beyond developing, we also realize that people need great technologies and great techniques that will allow them to grow their application. It's not enough for you to solely market your application. Most applications grow, for example, by word of mouth. People teach people about great apps. So we wanted to make that easy for you, and we wanted to build a technology that would make that easy for you. And then, of course, the most important probably is earning. You want to be able to earn money from building your apps. You want to earn money from all of your hard work. And we've been working on technologies to make that better. But all of these are bound together by analytics. And at the heart, and that's why it's right in the center of this diagram, at the heart of Firebase is analytics. So let me talk a little bit about analytics first. You may have heard of Google Analytics. Well, Firebase Analytics was built by the same people, but we built it from the ground up to optimize it for apps. We wanted to make it event and user-centric so that as you're building an application, you don't have to worry about analytics. They are things that have been collected automatically for you should you want that. Now, I've spent many years working as a developer and working as a developer manager, and I've been to way too many meetings, and I'm sure many of you have, where you sit around the table, and it's the developers are there, the marketing people are there, the architects are there, the business people are there, and you're talking about requirements, and then the requirement for analytics comes up. And the developers want one set of analytics, the business people want another set of analytics, the marketing people want another set of analytics, the social people want another set of analytics, and in the end you compromise by saying, we're going to do them all, and then the developer manager says, we can't do them all because we don't have the time. How many people have been in that situation? Quite a few. So with that in mind, when we built Google Analytics and when we built Firebase Analytics in particular, we wanted to make it really easy for developers to be able to build the most common analytics directly into their app without writing any code. So if we get into that circumstance where these people are all sitting around the table asking about the types of analytics that they want, all of the common things that you would expect in an app opening, app closing, migrating between screens, app being installed, app being uninstalled, all of these common events are actually captured for you without you writing any code whatsoever. There's a library that you link into your application and you're done. Now, I love to live by the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the things are usually what everybody wants. And I would say that this, by the 80-20 rule, 80% of the analytics that you want to capture are going to be captured for you in that way. But of course, there are custom analytics that you want to capture too, that we don't know about. Say you've built a game and you want to know how many people are beating the big boss on level 3. Well, we can't predict that. We don't know about that. That's your game, that's your domain. So as a result, of course, by writing some code, you can then collect those analytics also. You're not just limited to the analytics that we're giving you for free. And that's the idea behind Firebase Analytics. And it's one of the themes that you'll see throughout Firebase as I talk about it, that we really wanted to make life as easy as possible for developers. But if you want to go beyond what we're giving you in the product, we're making it as easy as we can to extend it. And here's an example of what an analytics dashboard in Firebase looks like. So a Googler built a game called Bingo Blast that he put out in the Play Store, and he got a number of users using it, and the idea was that we wanted to show off what the analytics looks like at Google I/O. So I took this screen capture of the console so that you can start seeing some of the analytics that were collected. And remember, this was the free analytics that he did not write any code for whatsoever. And when I say analytics are free, I also mean they're free money-wise too. You don't have to pay anything. They're completely unlimited. They're free, and it's at no cost to you whatsoever. So here's an example of some of the analytics. And if you look closely, you can see on each of these tiles, on the top left, there's a little Android icon on a couple of them, and there's a little blue iOS icon on a couple of them. And here's some of the things that he was able to collect. So for example, he has in-app purchases in his game, and if we take a look at, for example, the com.redhotlabs.bingo application, in the month before I captured this, he had 22,000 users, and the in-app purchases from these users was about $2,000 US. So this app's doing really, really well. And if we look at on the right here, the iOS one, he had 5,300 users, and he had $3,000 in in-app purchases. So one of the things, as I was saying, some of the habits of highly successful developers is that they're reaching multiple platforms. And as we can see here, even though this person who wrote this was from Google, he wrote it for Android, and then he used Firebase, and he also moved it over to iOS. You can see that he was very, very successful in doing so. He was making a lot of dollars. Some of the other analytics that are collected, as you can see at the bottom here, and I'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about it, is also crash reports. So as your application crashes, it's one of the things that gets really, really bad reviews. We've built crash reporting directly into Firebase, so that when an application crashes, you'll get the stack reading, the stack overflow, effectively reading of your application so that you can debug it even if the person who bought your application who had the crash is living on the other side of the world. And this is some of the things that we can see here, that in his application he had a number of errors, like he had 9,000 errors in the iOS one, impacting 2,000 users. But using the Firebase console, he was able to go in to see what those errors were without contacting the users directly, so he could fix them and redeploy. So that's a sneak peek at what's available in analytics. We do have an analytics session later today. I advise you to come along and see some of the great things that you can do with Firebase Analytics. But now I want to talk about the developer technologies and the things that were on the left of my diagram earlier on. So there's a number of back-end services that we provide that will allow you to build better apps, as well as app quality services for things such as the crash reporting I mentioned, as well as a test lab for Android. The first of these is the real-time database. So the idea behind the real-time database in Firebase is to allow you to effectively build codeless middleware. Now, I've been a web developer and a cloud developer for a long time, and web and cloud are really, really great technologies, but a lot of the time, if I just want to build something simple, if I want to build something that has a database and CRUD operations, so create, retrieve, update, and delete, there's a lot of code that I have to write on a server or on a cloud server just to do this. The idea behind the real-time database in Firebase is that you don't write any of that. You only write code that runs in your client application, and this gives you real-time data. So it's a cloud-hosted NoSQL database, and one of the magical things that it does is the synchronization and conflict resolution between different instances of an app. So we all live in a multi-device world. We all have at least one phone, and we have tablets, and maybe we also are using browsers, either on the phones or on our laptops as well. So if you have built an application where you have data that a person, for example, is updating on the back-end database, you want that update to be reflected across all of their devices. It's a lot of code you have to write, that's a lot of maintenance that you normally have to write, and the idea behind the Firebase real-time database is it does all of that for you. It's an event-driven database that you access directly from your app. If you're used to writing SQL-type applications, as I was before I discovered Firebase, you think about those are a pull model, where you write a piece of SQL that pulls data from a database and you have to fan it out across all of your users. The real-time database in Firebase is an event-based database. So whenever a change occurs within the data in the database that you're subscribed to, you'll get an update sent directly to you that's an event that fires in your application that you can then respond to. And this is an example, like just in an animation of showing what I was talking about. The user in the center here on the laptop made a change to the database, and the Firebase infrastructure fans that out, sends that event to all of the other devices in that user's universe, and will update if you as a developer choose to, of course, because you're just receiving that event. It's up to you how to handle that event, and you can update the state of the UI, or you can update data accordingly. It's pretty cool stuff, and I find it really exciting to develop with, because for me as a developer, I've been working on a game that it's made me so much more productive not to worry about writing a lot of code that runs on a server and maintaining all of that server infrastructure. I just design my real-time database. I design it on the Firebase console, and then I just write code that runs on my client, and I've only got one place to worry about writing code. And one of the other things that it also does is it handles a disconnected state. So for example, if you have a user that has two devices, and device A updates the data, and device B is offline, what happens when device B comes back online is that Firebase will actually notify device B that a change has happened to this data, so that device B can update itself automatically. It's really, really neat, and it's no code that you have to write. Again, that's one of the themes of Firebase, and it's one of the things that makes me personally so excited about Firebase, is that a lot of these common scenarios that would usually involve you writing a lot of code, doing a lot of debugging, doing a lot of servicing, are things that are handled for you, are things that we've done for you as part of building Firebase. So next is Firebase authentication, and I just noticed that they got rid of the English on these slides, so I'm going by memory. And so if I get any of these bullet points wrong, you're going to have to correct me, okay? So the idea behind Firebase authentication is that one of the most difficult and one of the most expensive parts of building any application is building a secure infrastructure for your user's identity. You've probably all heard stories of places that have been hacked and users' information has been stolen, and because of poor security, because of things that were written badly, because of maybe social issues where an employee let passwords out and stuff like that when he was no longer with a company, these kind of things. And for you to build your applications, it's a massive investment for you to build a secure infrastructure for your user's identity. So with that in mind, we built Firebase authentication, with Firebase authentication being a federated identity service, so that if users have identities on places like GitHub or Facebook or Twitter or Google and new ones that we're adding all the time, then the idea is that they can use that directly within your application. You're writing a little bit of code to hook up the button to whatever the back-end service is going to be, and then they can access their Firebase back-end data using that identity, instead of them needing yet another identity to sign up for your application. And one of the other reasons that we've been building this is that we've learned from end users that, from developers, that building a user interface to let somebody sign up, to enter all their details, to get a confirmation mail, to handle that confirmation mail, to move forward, all of that user flow to sign somebody up to use your app loses a lot of users. People just want to use their existing social identity. PHP or some static HTML or whatever it is, and it's a whole extra effort for you to build and maintain. Funny story, I'm going to be doing a demo this afternoon on cloud messaging on a website that I own and I built, and the day before yesterday, my billing on that website actually expired and broke my demo, because it's work that I have to do to maintain the billing on that, to maintain the domain name on that, and I frantically had to get my billing redone for that website, to repay for that website, so that I could do the demo today. That's work that I shouldn't have to do as a developer. That's all that extra infrastructure stuff that as a developer, that if I could make that easier, it'll allow me to focus on writing my code and on building better apps. So the idea behind Firebase hosting is that as part of your Firebase console, you've got the ability to serve basic, simple websites, static websites. So HTML, JavaScript, all of those kind of things, obviously images, it's secure socket layer by default, and you can map a custom domain to it. So it never takes away the requirement of you having to build and maintain a website, but it makes it a whole lot easier. And because it's done in Firebase, it's free as part of your Firebase subscription. And so there are different price tiers of Firebase subscription, but this is one of the ones that's in the free tier. So next up is Firebase storage. So this takes it a little bit further, where if you are building an application that requires you to store data on your user's behalf, maybe you're building a photo sharing application, maybe you're building a video sharing application, and you need to be able to store files on your user's behalf, and maybe your users will be sharing those files with each other. The idea is that Firebase storage will do that for you. Now, of course, you could have your own storage system, and there's no reason why you wouldn't do that. But think about a scenario of you're building an application that maybe manages videos on behalf of your users, and videos can get pretty big. Now, if user A shares a video with user B, and user B wants to download that video, what happens if they lose connectivity during that download? If you were building your own system, you as a developer would have to write code and have to write infrastructure to be able to manage handling that download if like the connectivity goes down, and then you can resume later on halfway through, those type of things. But with Firebase storage, we've written that code for you. We've done that type of thing for you. All of the quality services that you would expect from a cloud-based infrastructure for managing files have been built into Firebase for you. Next up is one of my favorites, and I have a talk this afternoon about this, and this is Firebase Cloud Messaging. Now, Firebase Cloud Messaging is a cross-platform, no-cost solution for real-time messaging. We've measured that connected devices will generally receive, something like 95% of connected devices will generally receive the message in less than 500 milliseconds. And we are actually reaching the point now where we're serving over 1 trillion messages per week on this. It's free for you to use if you want to do so. The idea is notifications are a great way to drive user retention. Notifications are a great way to drive user interaction. And by building this infrastructure that will allow you to do real-time notifications, or close to real-time notifications at no cost to you, we think you've got something that will really help you to build winning apps. Now, messages can be targeted in a number of different ways. So for example, when a user signs on to a Firebase app, and that Firebase app registers itself with cloud messaging, the device gets registered with cloud messaging, not the user. We've no details on the user's information. The user's information is private, but the device itself will be registered with cloud messaging so that we know the address of that device, so that messages can be sent to that. Now, once you have that device ID, you can send messages to a single device. That device can be subscribed to a group of related devices you can send to that group. The device can subscribe to something that we call topics, where the idea is that you as a developer can build a topic. And an example I always like to use is, for example, an application that tells you about airport delays. So we're in Beijing right now, and if you were building an application for your users that tells you about the status of flights in and out of Beijing, and if there is a delay to your flight, you could set up a topic for Beijing airports, and to send only to users who subscribe to that topic notifications about Beijing airports. Now, I live in Seattle, and I don't particularly want to receive notifications about Beijing airport when I'm at home. I do want to receive them while I'm here. So as a developer, for somebody who's in Seattle, you could then you could have a topic for Seattle Airport, so then notifications about delays or status of Seattle Airport could only be sent to that end user. All you have to do as a developer is set up the notifications, provide the user interface to your end users about what topics are available to them, and when the end user picks a topic, then when you send messages to the topic, only that user will get them. It's really powerful, it's really cool stuff. And when you add analytics on top of that, you can make it really interesting, so that you could say only users who've been online in the last 30 days should receive it, or only users in a particular time zone should receive it. You don't want to receive a notification for London Heathrow Airport, for example, in the middle of your night. So you can add analytics on top of all of this to be able to drive message targeting, to make it really, really smart. Messages are very powerful, but if they use incorrectly, they can also be very obnoxious. So you don't want to turn off your users. And as a result, we're providing the tools to allow you to be very versatile about how you use messaging. I'm going to be showing a demo of Google Cloud Messaging. The server that I spoke about that I built earlier on is using that. So if you come back this afternoon, I can show you how it all works. My other personal favorite is remote config. And this one takes a little bit of a moment to get your head around what's possible with remote config. Now, the idea behind remote config is that it's server-side variables instead of client-side variables. So you can build your application to be decoupled completely from server-side, from variables, by putting them on the server side and then driving their content off of analytics. Let me give you an example of this. The game that I mentioned that I've been working on, that I've been writing, it involves you interacting with a virtual character. And this virtual character, in the first version of the game that I built, it's an animated character, and she speaks English, because I speak English. And I've been adapting this game for other markets, so that I've built a version of it for the Japanese market, where the character speaks Japanese, and another one for the Korean market, where she speaks Korean. And I'm going to have to build one for the Chinese market soon, where she would speak Chinese. But what I've been able to do with this application using remote config was that a number of different things. First of all, if the user prefers English as their language, regardless of where they live, they could receive the English character. So all I have to do is set for that specific user the language on a server-side variable, and as a result, instead of me modifying the application, I can just give them the character that they want in the language that they prefer. Another example of this is that, so the application itself uses geolocation, so that if it's a game that you play in a number of locations in the real world, and so using geolocation and using Google's APIs for geolocation, you have an API key that you need to use. If I deploy that API key in my app, somebody could decompile that application and pull out the API key, and then maybe provide some kind of denial of service for me for the location services by hammering on that API key and overloading it so that it wouldn't work for me. But if I use remote config, I put that API key in remote config, I now no longer ship it with my application. So now as a user is running my application, they read the API key out of remote config, they get the API key data, and they're good to go with whatever they need to do. And if somebody does something so that my API key no longer works, all I have to do is change it once on the server in these server-side variables, and then the users will get the new API key going forward because they're reading it from the server. There's so many different ways that you can do things with this. It's a very simple but very powerful technology, and some of the scenarios that become available to you by using remote config, by using server-side variables to change the behavior of your application without you actually writing any code or deploying new versions of your application are really cool. I'll give one more, and that is if you're writing an e-commerce application, for example, and you could say, for example, provide a discount that, hey, I love people in China, so I'm going to give them a 10% discount on everything they buy in my e-commerce application, whereas people in the USA, I'm only going to give them a 5% discount. The idea is with analytics, I can then use an analytic that says if user is in China, set this variable to 10. If user is in USA, set it to 5. Otherwise, set it to, I don't know, 3. Something along those lines. So then the application, triggered by analytics, will be able to read that value and give me different discount amounts in those different countries. I can add another layer on top of this, then say, hey, if it's December, we're coming up to the Christmas period, let's double the discount. You know, so then China would get 20, USA would get 10, everybody else would get 6. All these kind of things become possible by having by having variables stored on the server side. You don't write any code to manage them in the server, and you just read them using Firebase remote config from the client side. And when you layer analytics on top of it, there's lots of fun things that you can do. So the next one is Test Lab for Android. And one of the things that we've learned about this since we've been working on it is that Android is a very, very diverse operating system. There's so many different phones, there's so many different flavors, there's so many different form factors, screen resolutions, those type of things of Android devices. And often, if you're a developer, particularly if you're a small developer, maybe you're in China and you want to test on a phone that's available only in the US. Let me give an example. How many of you are Android developers here? Okay, quite a few. Keep your hands up if you have a Google Pixel. None. Neither do I. Right? But if I want to build and test it on a Google Pixel, I don't have a Pixel. You don't have a Pixel. And what happens when the Pixel 2 or whatever the next version is going to be called comes out? It might take a while before you get one. But you want to be able to test on that. And that's the idea behind the Test Lab for Android, is that it's hosted by Google, and it's a way that you can upload your APK to Google and have Google test it for you on a variety of devices, most of which you probably don't have, many of which may not be available in your country. And think about just all of the work and money and expense that you have to do to maintain a test bed of all these different devices, with new ones coming out daily and new features coming out daily. It's a nightmare to be able to maintain that. So what we do is we have a number of devices, some virtual, some physical, in our data centers. We upload your APK to them, we do the tests for you, and there's a number of what we call robo-tests, which are standard tests like open, close, touch this, touch that, those type of things, swipe left, swipe right. And then there's custom tests that you can actually define a custom test that says, you know, enter this user's details, press this button, go here, go there. Those type of things to get the response, and then we'll give you reports of what happened, and we'll give you screenshots of what happened. So the idea is to take all of that burden, all of that expense, and all of that difficulty and complexity of testing on diverse devices, you know, away from you and giving you this service on which to do it. Crash reporting I mentioned earlier on, and the number one reason why people get negative reviews of their apps in the Play Store and in the App Store is because the app crashed. Earlier I mentioned I was writing a game, and like when I first sent a copy of the game to some people in Korea to test the game for me, it crashed every time. And I had no idea why it crashed every time, because I was using remote config to pretend I was in Korea so that I could get the Korean character. She was talking to me in Korean. I didn't understand a word of it, but I knew that it was working. But when I sent it to people in Korea, it was crashing. I didn't know why it was crashing, and it turned out that I had some bugs in my code that for checking the network, there was some difference in checking the network in Korea than I had in checking my home Wi-Fi. And as a result, it was trying to download videos that it couldn't actually see, and it crashed. And using crash reporting, I was able to see this. I couldn't call the person, because, well, I could call the person, but when I asked her, well, what happened? She said, I opened the app and said, you know, the app failed. And that was it. That was the only data that she had, and that was typically the only data that users have. But when I could go into crash reporting, I could actually see, and I could see a stack trace. And then from that stack trace, I could tell what went wrong and how to fix it, and I was able to fix it and ship a new version without getting on a plane and going to Korea to figure out why it was failing. And that's that's the real power of crash reporting. It's, you know, it'll allow you to see why things went wrong, and you don't have to wait for somebody to call you, that you can see the crashes. If you remember earlier when I showed in the console, you can see that this person had some crashes, and you can go into the Firebase console, who's getting the crashes, where are the crashes happening, why are they happening, and getting a stack trace of that so that you can fix it and push out a new version. And it's a great way also to use notifications, because then you can push a notification to say, hey, we're going to ship a new version because of a crash in XYZ. And again, this is all integrated with analytics. So you can use analytics, for example, to filter the crashes to say, okay, show me why people with a particular device in a particular place are crashing, so that you can group them together and figure out, like just really do a deep dive into understanding why your application may be failing. So those are the technologies that for developing and for, you know, building on top of the Android APIs and the iOS APIs to help you to build better apps. But beyond building apps, you also want to grow your apps and you want to grow your business. So the first of these is what we call app invites. Now, I have an awesome 15-year-old son. Oh, sorry, he just turned 16. I have an awesome 16-year-old son, and what he does is he goes into the Play Store and he downloads lots and lots and lots of games, and he plays these games for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he either throws them away or he keeps them. And then the ones that he keeps, he tells me about, so that I don't have to spend all this time downloading these games, and I discover some great and fun games because of my son. Now, we realize that not everybody has an awesome 16-year-old son like I do, so what we wanted to do was make it really easy so that if somebody is playing your game or playing your app and they want to share that with people that they care about or that they would like to discover this app, we wanted to make that easy for you, so we built app invites. Now, app invites, it allowed this, like if my son was using your app and your app had app invites built into it, then he could share it via SMS or he could share it via email. But what makes app invites really smart is that we put some AI into this, so that what it does is it looks at the type of application that he's sharing, and it looks at the type of person who generally likes that, and it sorts the contact list that way. So for example, he will, almost every time he shares a game with me, I know it's going to be a good game, I'm going to install it, so I'm going to be at the top of the list. It's not alphabetically sorted or anything like that, it's got this intelligence behind it. And his mom, who says he plays way too many games and never installs any that he sends her, is going to be at the bottom of the list. You know, so that's the idea behind app invites. You get the intelligence of the list being sorted according to the people who are most likely to really, really want to see this engagement. And as a result, that prevents spam. That prevents spammy type invites, and it makes the overall experience for the person sharing and the person receiving so much better. Now, this is built on a technology called dynamic links. Now, dynamic links are basically just URLs, but they're URLs that maintain context throughout a session. Now, that sounds really complex, so let me give an example of how these work. So, I like to eat, as you can probably tell, and say, for example, I have a recipe app on my phone, and I find a recipe for something that I really, really like, and what's going to happen? My wife, I'm a terrible cook, but my wife is a terrific cook. My wife's Chinese, so of course she's a terrific cook. And so what happens is I'll call her up and I'll say, hey Rebecca, I found a recipe in a recipe app for, some really great wonton. Do you want to take a look? And then she'll go to the app store and she'll take a look, and I say, yeah, no, it's the recipe app. R-E-C-I-P-E, yeah, A-P-P, yeah. Okay, you found it? There's 500 recipe apps in the store. Oh, it's the one with the carrot as an icon. Okay, you found it. Then she finds it, and then what happens? She tries to download it. To download it, she has to sign in. She signs in, she gets to the app, she downloads the app. By then, I've forgotten what the recipe was. I forgot what it was that I'm looking at. There's so much friction involved. So with dynamic links, the goal that we've been doing is that if I were to have that app open, and I would share with her this particular recipe within that app, when she receives that link, if she has the app already in her phone, then by pressing on that link, it would launch the app and take her directly to that recipe. If she doesn't have the app on her phone, by pressing on that link, it would take her to the App Store with the correct listing. Like I said, there's hundreds of recipe apps. And after installing the app, it would remember and take her all the way to that recipe so that she could read that recipe. That's the intelligence that's built into dynamic links. We've also been working on Google AdWords. So Google AdWords are a way that you can share your app with other users. So the idea is that you can share your app with other users who are app users, who are people watching on YouTube, who are people searching on Google, all of these type of things that if you subscribe to an AdWord for your application, it's going to be smart enough to share it with users who are relevant for that type of application. So for example, I love sports. And whenever I'm searching Google or watching YouTube or using applications, they're sports related. So if you are building a sports app, your ad that you've done is much more likely to reach me than my wife who does not like sports. So your spend on ads is intelligently filtered so that you're reaching the right users. Another one of my favorites is app indexing. Now app indexing, the idea behind app indexing is that you can discover your application through a Google search based on the content of that application. So if I give an example of, I used sports a moment ago. I love ice hockey, it's one of my favorite sports. And whenever I want to take a look at how my local team or my favorite teams are doing, I usually go to Google search and I search for it, and I'm taken to a web page, or I'm taken to a list of web pages, and maybe find one of those web pages to see the score of my local ice hockey teams. But I'll have an app from that team that I've installed and I've forgotten about. You know, this app doesn't use app indexing. I'm asking them to use it, because what would happen is if you build the app and the app is on the user's device, the user has already told you that they love your content because they've installed it on their device, the app, and they've kept it, they haven't gotten rid of it. So now in future, if they're searching for that type of content using the Google search app, the idea is, why take them somewhere else that might be something that they like when they've already said they like it in this app? And that's the idea of app indexing. So when you search for something using Google, using the Google search app, you can be taken to apps as well as sites. And in many ways, you're probably going to prefer to be taken to apps because you've already installed, you've already made an investment in those apps. One thing that we've recently released is also personal content. So if you have personal content on your phone, so for example, you have a note-taking app, and as well as loving hockey, I manage a youth hockey team, and I keep notes about all of their games in a note-taking app. Now the idea is that the personal content is also indexed for me, so sometime when I'm searching for details about hockey, I can be taken into my own personal notes that I might have made and forgotten about. It's really, really cool stuff, and it's a great way of re-engaging with your users. How many times have you built an app, you've put it out into the market, you've done advertising for that app, you've done marketing for that app, you've gotten lots and lots of installs, and then suddenly the installs dry off. And then you see, if you're using analytics, you see people uninstalling your app. And you don't have marketing budget to continue to be marketed. That's one of the ideas behind app indexing, because people are always searching using their phones. And if they're searching using their phones and they like the content that's in your app, they should be rediscovering your app. And that's why we built app indexing. Notifications is related to cloud messaging that I spoke about earlier on. But the idea behind this one is that this, again, is a no programming interface. So instead of like a lot of the features that I was talking about, like the versatile targeting, now with a Firebase console, and I'll demo this again this afternoon, one of your marketing people or something like that can go into the console, use analytics to pick an audience, and then send a notification directly to that audience, and then that audience can be re-engaged straight back into your application. It's very, very easy, it's very, very straightforward, and if you want to use real-time notifications in your app, but you don't want to build Google Cloud Messaging, this is another option for you. It's built on top of cloud messaging. It's using all the features of the technology that I spoke about earlier on that gives you the fast messaging and the reliable messaging delivery. Finally, on earning money, AdMob by Google, you may be familiar with already. And it's the other side of the adverts that I was speaking about earlier on. In this case, instead of you buying adverts and having those adverts delivered to the correct population that would receive them, this is if you put adverts into your app to make sure that the adverts match the population that's using your app. Like I mentioned, I love sports, so if you've built an app and you're using AdMob by Google to monetize your app, and then the applications, the adverts that I would be receiving are most likely going to be sports-related ones. So your app, that's a sports app, that you bought AdWords in, then me as an end user, I'm going to be receiving that one. So if you're building an app, you want to deliver ads to your end users that your end users will engage with. You don't want to be obnoxious. You don't want to give them ads that they don't care about. So AdMob, the power and the technology behind that is built into this, and there's an SDK for that for Firebase to make it very, very simple for you to do ads. Video ads, interstitial ads, banner ads, all those kind of things in your app. And that's it for this overview of Firebase. So thank you so much for attending, Shishini. And I have some time for some questions if anybody has any. I'll also be at the Firebase booth over in the main floor, so if you want to come and talk about Firebase. We have a question over here.
大家如果要用中文的话，我可以帮翻译。Hello. Firebase crash report will collect the native crash.
Will collect the native crash?
Yeah, native crash, the crash in the SO.
So the Android stack, so the stack list for Android, it will collect that. If it's stuff within the NDK, right now is not a very detailed list of what will be in the NDK. That's correct.
Will that support in the next release?
We're working on it.
Thank you.
你好，我想问一下，就是那个 Firebase 的话，我刚才来的时候发现已经中国官网是开了，但是呢，我看登录的时候上面报的是有些地区可能不能访问，所以我想问一下，就 Firebase 在中国能顺畅的用起来，现在能正常的用吗？就是我们有一些企业和有一些客户。
So the question is about whether Firebase can be used in China, because he tried maybe some still cannot access like Firebase console.
Yeah, right now it's for international applications, so I'm not sure the details of accessing it within China. The Firebase documentation, I believe we've just relaunched in China, and we're continuing to work on it.
你们可以 document 这个就可以访问 Firebase 点 Google 点 C 可以 access。The authentication cannot log in.
Well, you can't log into the documentation site?
No, the console.
Right, so the console at the moment is for international applications rather than for domestic Chinese applications, so you need whatever you do for international applications at the moment to be able to access Firebase console.
对，目前主要是就是如果你要发布到海外国际化的一些应用，你可以用到这个。
We hope to improve that.
我快请what kind of database Firebase used? Is MongoDB or other database?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
I mean, so what kind of database Firebase used? Is MongoDB or other database?
Oh, so the underlying database?
Yes.
It's one of our own. It's not MongoDB. It's just something we built ourselves.
So do you have some materials or introduction about the detail? I'm very interested about what kind of database you really used.
I don't have the details of that, but if you come see me at the booth, give me your contact details, I'll have somebody from the engineering team at Google send you those details.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for one more? Behind you. Oh, sorry.
你好，能听到你演讲很高兴。我想问一个问题，就是说Firebase 在安卓平台上，就是移动端，然后它就是依赖于谷歌服务嘛，在中国就在中国很多谷歌服务都没有开启，没法用，是不是只能在国外才可以用这个 Firebase 在安卓平台？然后第二个的话就是统计里面不是有事件打点的东西，就是它是不是就是比如说我上传的原始日志数据，我可以下来吗？
So two questions. First question is Firebase depends on the Google Play services. Google Play services not in China.
Android, yes.
Yeah, in Android. So whether it's able to use in China. Second question is about can we download the logs from the question report?
Okay. I'll answer the second one first. The answer is yes. That's easy. So for the first part of it, the Google Play Services binaries, we're merging into the Firebase binaries. So Google Play Services as a runtime is kind of going away in favor of Firebase. When that's going to be available for native apps in China, for local apps, I can't say right now. Do you want to translate?
就是说第二个问题是可以，第二个问题是可以下载，但第一个问题是说什么时候可以 available？ 现在 Firebase 的这个 library depend on 这个 Google Play Service， 所以是不是在中国什么时候能用这个现在没什么可以评价的。
So if any other questions, I'll be over at the Firebase booth in the expo. It's all the way down there. So please come see me, and thank you very much, 谢谢你。